Have you ever had this kind of a connection with someone?
You know each other so well that you can say all you need to say with just a look.
This is queer.
Sometimes it's a Call Me By Your Name-esque romance between two queer people in Mexico, and other times it's a drug-fueled nightmare that lands somewhere in between surrealism and completely abstract. But why? Where do we fit into this? And what does surrealism even mean?
Daniel Craig's Lee is like the gay man that all straight people think gay men are like. There's even a part when Daniel Craig is coming on to these guys and they say something to the effect of, "Oh, he just can't be friends with us. He always just wants to sleep with me." Now, whether Lee was coming on to these guys or not, he was. There's sometimes this apprehension between a straight guy that loves boats and a gay guy that just wants to be friends.
Regardless, he doesn't let those losers ruin his night. Instead, he goes to his #1 spot, a local bar, and picks up some random dude with a centipede necklace whom he never sees again. This is the first instance of the centipede, unless you count the poster, in the entire film. It's a reoccurring symbol that often hangs from a necklace of someone Lee sleeps with.
Clearly, the centipede is disgusting and creepy, so it makes sense that most cultures will view it as a bad omen. But when it comes to what it could symbolize, the centipede could be a variety of things.
Specifically secrets, repressed desire, or flat-out lying. A theme that comes up early and often, so stay tuned. However, it doesn't appear again in this form for a little while.
The wise old queen who taught me that I had a duty to live, to conquer hate with knowledge and sincerity and love.
Fresh off a rather sad one-night stand, Lee goes back to doing what he does best: wandering around, getting drunk, and trying to have sex with people. However, there is one scene that might catch you off guard. Lee is sitting at a bar, clearly down on himself, when he sees a TV of static before he himself becomes static. Strange would be an understatement, given that it's a pretty straightforward romance up until now. Yet, it's the first moment when you start to realize this whole song and dance that Lee does is taking an extreme toll on him.
Everything Lee does is go, go, go. Don't think, get drunk, have sex. Just don't stop. But in this moment, he has to slow down. He clouds his own sadness with these endless dopamine rushes, but you can't hide from yourself forever. And in this moment, he's forced to sit down and contemplate the situation that he's put himself into.
Much like a TV that's on but only showing static, he is barely functioning. Being wealthy and free has proven to get him nothing but sadness. He's unhappy, unloved, and fading away like TV static. A placeholder between programs, or in his case, people, not going anywhere or belonging to anyone but the streets. That is until he finds Eugene, a new guy on the block that he just can't quite seem to pull.
This is all too real. So often we find ourselves on autopilot, underachieving day to day as we crawl through life, going to work, coming home, watching TV, and doing it all again. These aren't inherently bad things, but eventually the days will start to blur together, years will pass, and you've gone nowhere. So how do you pull yourself out of the mud? This is the question I'm sure Lee is asking himself, and he thinks the answer is Eugene.
Eugene is fascinating and sexy to him, a wild card that he seems to believe is the one, the perfect man for him to love and grow old with. We get scene after scene of Daniel Craig's Lee stalking Drew Starkey's Eugene until he finally gets to meet him. He embarrasses himself with these forced bows and awkward stalking, but from the first time they talk, they are inseparable, going to bars, walking the streets, going to nice diners. They even have sex after Lee slowly works up the courage to find out if he's queer or not. Unfortunately, after they finally smash, Eugene grows distant, causing Lee to have a near mental breakdown. He gets desperate, clawing, and downright embarrassing, becoming drunker, sweatier, and more drugged up with every passing minute. Unable to accept the fact that Eugene doesn't seem to want anything from him but sex, Lee descends into a self-imposed hell of crack and desperation, even breaking down and constantly asking Eugene to go to South America with him in an attempt to pull him away from the competition in the area.
It's hard to watch because it comes across so relatable. We've all had that person that we thought we loved, only for them to become distant or completely just cheat on us. And then in a desperate attempt to win them back, we further degrade ourselves as a last-ditch attempt to save what we think we had. We've all done it. We've all been embarrassing. And since we have, seeing this hits really close to home.
Strangely, Lee is obsessed with this plant he heard about called ayahuasca. Now, Aaron Rodgers knows a thing or two about that.
Master plant teachers.
As for Lee, he's heard that apparently the Russians are using it to communicate telepathically with each other and are attempting to use it for mind control. Lee is fascinated with this and wants to explore what it can do with Eugene. Bringing us to...
This is the part of the film where Lee is losing his mind from all the poor decisions he's been making. The drinking, the drugs, the sex. And just the pure desperation has led him into this horrible downward spiral of withdrawals. It's a pretty ugly situation that Lee has gotten himself into, made worse by him clinging to Eugene for comfort through his shivers.
It's hot on the outside and cold inside.
That's why they call it Baked Alaska, I imagine.
Despite paying for his trip, allowing him to coast with him free of charge, and letting him leave whenever he wants, Eugene grows even more distant.
He barely ever talks to Lee, and when he does, it feels like he's only doing it out of necessity. But after the doctor's visit, Lee finally slowly starting to get better, and even gets better enough to sleep with Eugene again. Hey, maybe things aren't so bad. At least that's what I thought, until Lee tries to be intimate with Eugene again the next morning and gets violently thrown down without a word.
Lee quickly rationalizes it away and continues on his cheery way. Pretty horrible, but for the entire film, Eugene has been running away from Lee's embarrassing attempts to get to know him. A pretty clear red flag that he doesn't want anything to do with Lee. From the painful bow Lee gave him before they knew each other to the drunken attempt to talk to him at a gay party, the more Lee does, the more Eugene pulls away. Finally, it seems to boil over with him shoving Lee off of him.
This is yet another example of a horrible but very relatable situation. Whether you've been on the receiving end or not, we all know the feeling of being thoroughly rejected, as well as the feeling of disgust when you see somebody that is absolutely desperate for your attention. I don't know if it's human nature or what, but seeing someone bend over backwards to get my attention makes me want to run the opposite direction.
Lee wants so badly to feel whole that he goes way too far to obtain it, much to the horror of the people around him. Truly, it's unfortunate that life is made up of moments where we tried just hard enough to get what we wanted. Any more and we would overshoot it, and any less and that would leave us in the cold. An impossibly fine balance to walk, especially when seeking love. Yes, Lee is degrading himself just to get Eugene's attention, but Eugene is simply not the right person for him. Lee's charms and persistence is perfect for someone out there, he just hasn't found that person. But hyper-focusing on this one guy isn't going to help him either. Just as life teaches us day to day, the more we focus on one person, the less opportunity we have with someone else. So you have to make sure they love you and your weird quirks, or you've wasted your time. Unless you're in love, then focus on that one person. Sure, it sucks to have someone stalk you and constantly demand your attention, but Eugene is acting just as childish, if not more, than Lee. He's taking advantage of a man desperate for connection by allowing him to buy a vacation, using him for sex when he pleases, and offering really nothing in return.
There's never a conversation about Lee's behavior or Eugene's disquiet with that behavior. Probably because Eugene would rather use him as a plaything than have a serious conversation about boundaries, leading to a toxic and horrible relationship that gives Lee false hope. And here's where things go from bad to worse.
Lee and Eugene find a witch doctor of sorts and finally go on their ayahuasca journey. Lee still desperately wants to find out if it will allow him to communicate telepathically, and he actually gets that. Him and Eugene have this incredibly intense trip where they actually communicate without speaking, and their bodies start becoming one and the same. Almost as if the trip was trying to tell them of the intense connection they could have, or perhaps the intense connection Lee is desperate for. Lee could really never know what Eugene's trip was like, but if one thing is clear, they have some sort of chemistry. Unfortunately, like the centipede, Eugene is holding things back, not telling Lee important truths about himself or the relationship that will forever keep them from being anything other than a situationship. The age difference between the two is clearly a factor. Lee is a mature man with immature tendencies, but he's good at talking to people. He's open and willing to talk about what he's feeling or doing, whereas Eugene may as well be the complete opposite, rarely saying anything while Lee rambles about God knows.
Or, if we run a dramatic joint, as a screaming pig covered with burning brandy runs out of the kitchen and
Being able to listen is a great straight until you have to say something, and Eugene just can't seem to do that. He's still so young and doesn't seem to have the experience or the know-how to simply communicate the complex feelings he's having, attacking Lee instead of talking to him. After the trip, he can't even talk about what he saw or felt to the witch doctor that helped him. He seems scared of what it could mean for him and his relationship, so instead of working it out, he runs.
Whatever the case may be, he leaves, bringing what they had or could have had to a swift end. Again, without so much as a word about it. A completely immature and mean-spirited thing to do when all you had to say was sorry, no, or I don't know how to handle what I'm feeling, I need time.
Up until now, things have been pretty straightforward. There's a few ghostly shots of Lee, thinking about the things he wishes he could do with Eugene, a few surreal moments, and a lot of relationship drama. Yet here, the story proper ends. Lee's arc is complete, the love story has ended, and Eugene has run away. A sad way to end things for sure, but necessary. Eugene was secretly horrible most of the film, and Lee was just too desperate for genuine, almost telepathic communication to see it. Both seem to realize it's not meant to be, but it's about to get even more depressing. In these last few minutes, the film gets incredibly weird. To quickly sum up, Lee falls from the sky and lands back in Mexico 2 years later, and everything is basically the same. The bar is still there, the people are still there, and even the dirty, disgusting hotel he piped ass in is still there. Almost like while he was away, nothing he did mattered, and when he returned, he may as well have fallen from space back into his old life. We are then treated to dream sequences of him accidentally killing Eugene while he's wearing a centipede, Lee peering into a model version of the hotel he's staying in, and suddenly getting super old and die. The end!
A truly nightmarish selection of visuals that act as a nightmarish nutshell for the rest of Lee's life, never amounting to anything more than the sum of his parts, longing for the connection he never had. He dies in the same bed, in the same hotel, where he spent so many nights. So many one-night stands with so many nameless people. But what does that all mean?
For one, he peers into the model version of the hotel as a creative visual to show that he is imagining what his life will be like in the future if he doesn't change. He's been on autopilot for so many years, even managing to be back to square one. The Ship Ahoy bar, all these years later. He's gone nowhere, achieved nothing, and still lacks a strong connection with anyone. Depressing as it may be, this can happen incredibly easily. One day you could be starting a new job, excited for the opportunity, and the next moment years have passed and you remain where you started. The same can go for love. Whether you're in a relationship you know you shouldn't be, or are struggling to find the one, we are so often the ones to blame for these bad situations. Lee only knows how to mindlessly sleep with someone. Anything beyond that, he struggles with because he lets his subconscious desperation for love drive his actions.
Allowing his same subconscious to drive him into the dirt when his heart is broken. He's a victim of his own shortcomings and simply can't see past his own nose. Sure, it's an easy life, he's wealthy and has enough charisma to sleep with a lot of people, and he makes friends easily. But the second anything more is asked of him, he folds. His lifestyle is exactly why he can't maintain the love he wants so badly. Like so many of us, we are on, but barely functioning. We're on autopilot day to day, like the TV static that is consuming Lee. On, but barely functioning. And in order for us to become a better person or find love that we're so desperate for, we need to come off the autopilot, make a meaningful change in our lifestyle, and be active in our own lives, or we're going to become like the static on a TV, fading away and forgotten.